Welcome to the public Helios at AI for You Cafe on September 28th. The speaker is today Katri Greiman, research scientist at VTT Technical Research Center of Finland in the Future Consumer Team, with a talk on context recognition and information overload in social media and messaging, result of 2 user studies. My name is Carmen McWilliams, and I'm the moderator and organizer of the cafe. I'm the director of the company Grassroots Arts in Cologne, Germany, and partner in the European AI for You project and in the Helios project. So therefore, this cafe is a cross-project collaboration effort between the European research projects Helios and AI for EU. So please take notice that the session will be recorded. No confidential information shall be shared in this cafe session. In this cafe, the speakers express their personal view and opinions. This is not necessarily the official AI for You project or Helios project opinion. The Web Cafe offers a series of live web sessions which is taking place regularly. Cafe is an online forum to gain insight into the European AI and social media scene. Participants get the chance to share knowledge and experiences and meet stakeholders from various areas of AI research and social media applications. Please write your questions to speakers in the question panel on the right side. It's interactive. I want to welcome you all here. I see the participants coming in the door to the cafe. Welcome, great you're here. So we need your questions after the presentation, so please send us your questions. They're very, very valuable to us, and Katri tries to answer them. So now I come to, of course, our highlights. Hi, Katri. I introduce you now.
Hello.
Katri Greiman works as a research scientist at VTT Technical Research Center of Finland in the Future Consumer Team. She has a Master of Science degree in Media Technology from Aalto University. She has nearly 15 years of experience in consumer and user studies, especially in the field of co-creation. She has been involved in over 30 user-centric development projects on different digital platforms. In addition to Helios, she has recently worked in projects dealing, for example, with the user experience of a healthy snack machine. Wow. Collaboration
I can't hear you, so I'm not sure whether. So I'm not sure because I couldn't hear Carmen's voice just right now. So I'm not sure whether you can hear me. Can you hear me? Okay, I will switch probably.
Yes, that was it. I hear you. Great. Hi, Katri. And the Helios project, for our audience who's maybe not familiar, is about hyper social media platform, and it's like AI for You. They are the next generation internet program, which started in 2019, and they started with parallel these projects until they run now until the end of 2021. So now, Katri, you're there?
I am indeed here. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I will start the slideshow. I'm sorry, my cordless phones decided to, for the first time, not to work when I needed them to. So I will be talking about context recognition and information overload in social media and messaging. And as an introduction, I will tell you that the idea for this study stems from the ubiquitous nature of smartphones, computers, and nowadays also smartwatches, which makes it easy to get inundated with messages and notifications from different applications. So for some reason, it's now showing me. No. While some people feel they can turn off their phones when they get overwhelmed, not everybody can do that, or they can get an uneasy feeling doing so. So they get the feeling that I'm helpless if I turn off my phone or notifications. And as a sort of solution for this, we thought that context recognition might help in recognizing when and where certain messages should be prioritized. In our study, we wanted to find out how people deal with information overload and how they feel about context recognition. And I will be presenting at least the results of one study. That was an online discussion study about information overload. And if there is enough time, then I will also present some teachings of a pilot study using a peer-to-peer messaging application. But because there was not much to tell about that, then we'll skip that if we run out of time. So, information overload, this is sort of an introduction to the theme. Research shows that notifications and interruptions have a harmful effect on work performance, especially during tasks that need concentration. So after your primary task has been interrupted, it takes a while to get back to where you were before the interruption. And on the other hand, we also know that alarm fatigue is a real phenomenon in an environment like where there are many alarms. So like, for instance, a hospital. And when there are too many notifications, and some of them might be false alarms, or even a majority of them may be false alarms, users become more desensitized towards constant pings and bleeps, and they are distracted and could even end up disabling alarm sounds to concentrate on other things that require their full attention. And although instant messaging is not quite as critical as alarms in a hospital environment, continuous beeps from the phone can be equally distracting and break concentration. Here I actually got a new phone, and this is something that came up on the screen as I started using. Is it wanted me to set up this digital well-being sort of focus mode to pause distracting apps. We did a study on information overload with 28 people on HouseSpace, which is an online collaboration platform. And the participants, they were all adults over 18 years of age. And the only requirement that we had was that they need to be a somewhat active smartphone user. And the users in the study, when we started the study, they could see what other people were commenting and writing, and they could respond to other people, but they could not see each other's names. And they could also like comments made by others. And in the study, the respondents, they were presented with a narrative describing the busy life of a working mother who used a management application to control her phone notifications and inform her closest contacts about her context when it was necessary. On this slide on the right-hand side, you can see a screenshot showing how the use case was presented. Of course, you cannot see the text, and it is in Finnish also. And there's a small snippet of the discussion. So it looks like this on the HouseSpace forum. There's a like button and a reply button. In this study, context means the situation in which users find themselves at any given moment. So this is a screenshot of the messaging application that we used in the pilot study, described shortly at the end of this presentation. And you can see some of the context here. Context can be defined by the user, for instance, based on their location, or time of the day, or even the Wi-Fi they are using, or it can be evaluated automatically, for example, through the activity or movement speed. In the screenshot, some of the default contexts are related to location and movement speed. So you can see there's walking, biking, driving. And I have created a custom context, koti, which means home in Finnish, based on my home Wi-Fi. So whenever my phone is connected to my home Wi-Fi, will automatically put me in this koti context. And you can see it's currently active. This screenshot comes from this morning, I think, or this afternoon. The zeros shown here, they show the relative importance of the message in the current context. Of course, because I didn't manage to get anybody send me a message at this moment when I was taking the screenshot, so I don't have anything here, but they will show you then when the message arrives, it will show you it in its current context, the importance. And the picture on the right, it shows a time-based context being defined. So you can, for instance, create a context for your typical working hours. And the messages would be delivered to the user in a context that would be suitable, and thus minimizing information overload. Well, this is a case of information overload on the screen right now, but I wanted to show all the questions that were presented to the participants so that you can see what they were discussing. I'm not even going to read through all of them, and I'm not expecting you to either, but I will go through the responses to each theme in the order that was presented here. And the main themes in the discussion, they were based on first on the narrative. So people were commenting on the application itself that was described in the story that was told, and then how they deal with notification, how they feel, and what are their habits related to location and context sharing. Also, we asked a question about the potential changes that people had in their communication habits after the pandemic lockdown started, as well as some questions about social media and messaging services currently in use. So I will skip past this slide because there's a lot of information there. So to recap, we described a use situation for a busy working mother who was juggling her work and children's hobbies and everything like that, and described this management software that she was using to control her notifications and messaging. The application function as described in the use case presented to the participants was seen to be interesting, but very few people felt their own lives were busy enough to warrant this kind of app to control their messaging. And the users felt that this might work well when your life is busy and it is full of routines and predictable, but they were wondering whether it allows enough room for surprises and emergencies, because the way that we described it was that it was very sort of expectable what kind of information would be coming at what time. Also, the users felt that if a single application controls too much of your information, it is also seen as a big threat as opposed to giving small pieces of your information to many applications. And giving complete control to a system, artificial intelligence, or an application might also make people uncomfortable. People felt that they should be given the last say in who gets to contact them. And the phone or application should not assume anything without checking with the user, or this needs at least to be an option the user can opt out of. And there's I've included this screenshot from Google Mail actually. It is sort of like a spam filter that nothing gets deleted automatically, but you get a sort of grace period to review your messages and see whether there was something important that you were missing. Also, the users felt that getting started with an application like this might be a steep hill, because it would be beneficial to provide an easy start and add features and controls little by little. Because it seems like a lot of work initially to teach the application your habits and routines. And you also need to do a lot of work yourself, for example, by making sure your calendar is up to date. And it transpired also that not everybody uses a calendar, and especially not a digital calendar. And even though they might use it for their work life, they might not use it for their private appointments. While users often express a strong need for privacy and control of their own data, they might use, for example, Facebook and Google services and share a lot of personal data with and through them. This is probably a trade-off with what you want and what you need to do or what you need to give up to get it. As the appeal of certain services is so strong that users are more willing to exchange their personal data for the possibility to use these services. And this could also be to some extent due to the feeling that, well, everybody else is doing this, so it must be okay. They have billions of users worldwide. Many people already use the silent profile on their phones, for instance, during the night or when they are working with customers or making a presentation in a webinar like now. For some, the silent or vibration mode is their default setting nowadays, and noisy notifications are thus increasingly disturbing and annoying because they are even more distracting. People might also be annoyed with themselves by their tendency to check their phones whenever they hear a beep from their phone. So they have resorted to using silent modes, not always keeping their phones with them and disabling notifications. Also, people use different notification tones for different applications to distinguish more urgent messages based on the application used to send them. And this is also a form of context-sensitive behavior limiting information overload. Context awareness, in the context of context awareness, we were discussing especially location sharing, because that is one of the most common and well-known contexts. So people might be more comfortable with temporary location sharing when they choose to do so. So for instance, letting their friend know they are on their way and letting the friend follow their progress in real time. On social media, many people are broadcasting widely, even to strangers, where they are and with whom. Others are, on the other hand, much more wary. A very wide scale of attitudes exist even within a small group of people who might have very different settings and comfort levels. This could also be a cultural or generational thing. But transparency and knowing what is happening is key to trust. People want to be able to check and control what information is seen by others at any time. Even when a person is sharing information of their own accord on social media, they might feel uncomfortable and people are referring to that information if that information has not been disclosed directly to them in a private conversation. And while sharing your calendar at work is acceptable to most of us, private calendars are a different matter altogether. People who use their work calendars also for private appointments usually make sure that these are indeed marked private and not visible to their colleagues. Work life is in a way public, and with private matters it is more about making the choice what to tell and to whom. Within the family, sharing location information, especially if it's a decision made together, is okay, usually. And being comfortable with this usually comes from mutual trust and in some cases genuine need. So if, for instance, you have somebody in your family who is in poor health or might possibly have an emergency, or if you have a small child coming home from school on their own, sharing location data seems to be more acceptable. It also transpired that some people do have a more pressing need to be off the grid or in peace, and they mightn't be likely to turn their phone off completely or leave it at home when going out in order to feel like they truly have their own time. And it can also feel like a luxury to be able to do so. While sharing a location in many contexts can feel a sort of invasion of your privacy, Google Maps and the location services that are tied to it are quite popular. This is a trade-off many are willing to make to get the content that is valuable to them. We also asked about classifying contacts based on urgency, so you could make sort of like priority contacts for yourself. And some felt that it would be great to be able to classify people based on the importance of their messages or roles, but at different times throughout the day, different people are a priority. During office hours, work-related calls and messages are usually prioritized, while they might or do feel a nuisance in the evening when it's time for messages and calls from friends and family. These are in turn, with some exceptions, not typically something that needs to be addressed during the workday. And the opportunity to classify your contacts would be even more convenient and necessary if you have many contacts and ongoing discussions. On the other hand, even somebody who is not frequently in contact with you can have an important message or piece of information for you. And this can lead to, for instance, Facebook Messenger. If you don't have, if somebody is not your friend, you have to find their message through your messaging app. This is also one of the pitfalls of web filtering, because either there is no real need to classify contacts based on their urgency, as the total volume of contacts, messages, and phone calls is low, or then there is the underlying feeling that a message from anybody can be important. Most smartphones nowadays already offer options for silencing only certain groups or blocking contacts or letting only certain phone calls through. But this is often application dependent, and you need to define this information separately for all your messaging and communication apps. We also asked people about sharing your own status, as also showing that you're busy, for instance, to people trying to reach you. And it was appealing to many, but not everybody feels that they need something like this. There's also a general assumption that some people will not abide by the information given and will contact you regardless of your status. Of course, that's another problem altogether. The information would be useful both when trying to reach another person and when trying to convey this information to others. And in some cases, like working from home, it's also sometimes important to inform your family members that you are not to be disturbed at a certain time. There's also the possibility and worry that if you could set your status manually, you could also forget to remove the information. So sort of like I forgot my phone on silent when you weren't supposed to. While the feature is familiar from many workplace applications where the information is automatically updated using your calendar information, users might feel different about using a similar feature linked to their personal calendar and in their personal life, thus broadcasting their status potentially to all of their contacts. As previously, privacy in your personal life is quite different from privacy in your work life. Nowadays, many people routinely use location services with apps, but sharing their own location in real time with others is not quite as common. On occasion, some people do allow for temporary sharing for their friends, for instance, on WhatsApp or Snapchat. And many people, of course, use location-based services such as apps for local traffic. In the Helsinki region is called Reittiopas or Google Maps. And sharing your location with them is typically necessary to get the most out of your use. So if you need navigation or route information, the app needs to know where you are currently. Often people only share their location with certain apps and only when using those apps, but some people are less strict about their privacy settings. However, users generally feel that there needs to be a valid reason for requesting location information. So, for instance, if an online newspaper wants to know where your location, then this is not seen as necessary, as you don't see yourself benefiting from them knowing this information about you. And too much tailoring and targeting can also feel stalkery, even though many people are used to it, and it has become more visible now with every site being forced to request permission. As I said before, we also asked about the communication habits in 2020. So this study was done in the summer of 2020, and Finland had been in lockdown for some months by then. But the spring of 2020 didn't change people's communication habits that much, even though face-to-face meetings were probably more rare. And some people reported phoning more or using software more commonly used at work, like Teams or Zoom or Skype, for communicating with friends or even trying new ways of communicating. So there were a lot of apps that were launched and used at least once, trying to figure out ways to interact with people. Phone calls were a bit longer and more common when compared to the usual contact frequency. But most felt that the change was probably not permanent, and by summer they had even shifted back to normal during spring. So the summer of 2020 in Finland was relatively normal with very few cases, so people were more relaxed by then. We were also asking about messaging and social media applications that people were using. And here we can see the use of messaging and these apps within our participant group. So as the participants were recruited via email and were supposed to be somewhat active smartphone users, well, it's no surprise that they use email messaging and social media. WhatsApp has quickly grown to be a very popular way of communication, at least in Finland. So you can see that basically everybody uses WhatsApp and email. Almost everybody uses Facebook, SMS, and Instagram is also very popular. And then Microsoft Teams probably used more in the working life rather than in your private life. And then there are like none of the respondents, which was not very unexpected as they were supposed to be smartphone users, was very like not using any of these aforementioned. These were just a selection of all apps that were available, but we tried to choose ones that are at least somewhat well known so that they would have more than one user. When we come to notification sounds used, we can see that this is slightly different from because this is the same order that they were in the previous picture. So you can see that, for instance, SMS is probably usually deemed to be important information that comes via text message, so that people keep those notification sounds on, and also WhatsApp. So instant messaging is seen to be more important than, for instance, email. So people are maybe not expecting quite as urgent information via email. And then you see that the figures for Facebook and Instagram, they drop drastically from because Facebook was used by 27 and Instagram by 22 of our users. So you can see that these are social media, and these sort of social apps are not seen as quite as important. And also, I don't know whether this is blocking your view, but you see that there are 5 people among the group of 28 that don't use any notification sounds with any of the aforementioned apps. And here we come to summary and conclusions. So people have very different approaches and comfort levels. And while some are happy to broadcast to everybody where they are and what they do, others might want to be off the grid, even from the people closest to them at some times. Obviously, this is not to say that people who are sharing their activities on social media update everybody religiously on their every move, and they can also sometimes decide to be unreachable. The key often seems to be control, or at least the feeling of being in control. If it feels like you're the one making the active decisions, even if it is a lump decision like giving certain rights to certain people or applications, you accept the consequences of these decisions better. Transparency is also important, knowing what your information is used for and feeling that the reason for doing so is valid. And while privacy and sharing your data can be a big concern, most Finnish smartphone users use, for example, WhatsApp, Facebook, or Google services. And when you get something you really value in return for sharing information about yourself, it seems more like a fair trade. One problem arises when somebody seems to have information you do not remember or even know you were giving them. Like sometimes it can feel like a bit weird for Facebook to show you ads for the very same product you were viewing in an entirely unrelated online store just previously. And it also feels more daunting to give one application or service access to all your information rather than giving several applications a small glimpse of the whole. While in our study, the respondents felt like their life was not busy enough to warrant a specific tool for controlling their information overload, for many, it actually seemed that they had the need to do just that because they were putting their phone on silent, either permanently or in certain situations, or muting specific conversations, contacts, or apps. So they were controlling their information overload. If teaching an application to know your habits is time-consuming and difficult, people may resort to their old ways and delay doing something that requires a lot of effort and concentration, even if it would help you in the long run. This manual information overload control is often context-related as well. There are different rules and ways of doing things for the workplace and for your free time, for example. So in some situations, silencing and turning off your phone could also be a sort of sign of respect, because now you have my full undivided attention. The same user habits apply for classifying contacts. Some have already done to some extent that, and of course many people are, for instance, using different phones for their work and for personal matters. It's also quite common, at least here in Finland, not to answer calls from unknown numbers, which is also a form of prioritizing known and important contacts. Notifications are designed to be just that, notified. They can signal the arrival of something very interesting or important and are thus very good at disrupting work and breaking concentration. Status information is familiar from many Office applications that use calendar data, but bringing this to a user's personal life is different. While at work, the employer effectively owns the user's time, and thus it feels like sharing the information on what you're doing is par for the course. But in your private calendar, it's another matter altogether, as typically you are the one controlling and making the decisions on what to do and what is important, and also making the decision on what information to share and with whom. So you're also the one who gets to prioritize what you're doing with your time in your free time. The feeling of control also applies to muting or shutting down conversations. You never know beforehand whether a previously unknown or unimportant contact might have something very important and urgent for you. Like with spam filtering, allowing users to see in some way the content they might have missed is important. And this will also help in building better filters when users are given the opportunity to flag false positives. Of course, not everybody will require this, but many people like to know that the option is there. The need to share certain information with a certain group of people can be temporary but important in specific situations. While a user might not share their location with another person permanently, they might share their progress temporarily when arriving, let's say, to pick up said person. Like with delivery services, this information provides value to the person waiting because it gives them a more specific time frame and ability to plan ahead. This is also beneficial for the user who does not have to give constant updates on their expected time of arrival. And allowing for ad hoc changes in permissions and sharing in a way that also makes it clear these are not permanent changes can be beneficial for both parties. Here we see an example of the Budbeat delivery service. I'm not sure whether you can see it perfectly, but it shows the recipient of a package, the location of the delivery van on the map, its estimated time of arrival, and the number of stops it's going to make before it arrives at your location. So people can plan ahead, and if they need to go out to the shops, they know that they have roughly 1 hour to go before their delivery. So I will quickly go through the pilot study that we tried doing. So the premise of the study was to use this peer-to-peer messaging app to test the effect of context recognition and information overload. So here you can see a screenshot of a later incarnation of the app with some user data censored. So you can see the active contacts at the top and different topics or discussion channels underneath. The study was supposed to be at least 1 month with a minimum of 20 people using the messaging app. The target group was VTT summer trainees, and we wanted to gather actual user experience on information overload and context recognition. The app for the purposes of the pilot was rebranded as VTT Summer App and modified to the specific user group with default topics related to different VTT locations, for instance. So people working in Espoo would have a group for Espoo things. The app was launched in late, it says July, but it was June 2021, and marketed through online induction events and through emails sent by HR. Users were also required to provide their Google account details, but they were told that they could make a new dummy account as well, because if they felt uncomfortable sharing their primary address with us. This information was needed so that the limited group of users could be added to the test group within the Google Play Store, because our IT security thought it would be too dangerous to teach people to allow APK installations. So we had to go through the Google Play Store. Well, results, there weren't any. There were very few people who supplied their Google account details to be added to the test group, and there were not enough people communicating through the app, so it soon dwindled away. And we also received no replies to our feedback survey, even though we encourage also those people who had not used the app to reply. And in the end, we decided not to send any reminders for the feedback survey, because since there were no replies, initially we thought that we wanted to guarantee the anonymity for the respondents. So if there had been like a couple of replies, then they would have been identifiable. And here's a long list of possible explanations for why this didn't work out, but as we got no feedback from the targeted users, these are our own theories and guesses. But one of the issues probably related to it being a peer-to-peer messaging app, so because there was no bot or central server, so there would have needed to be several users online so that they could have received synced messages. And also because it's needed to be voluntary, so we couldn't go through the supervisors, because then this would have compromised the voluntary nature of the experiment. And we had to go all communication through other people, and were not able to interact with the potential users directly. And also there was no possibility to have a face-to-face launch event or a joint onboarding session where several people would have joined simultaneously and then would like organically receive the right amount of traffic on the app. Also, due to technical difficulties, the launch was delayed, and probably those who were willing to communicate with each other had already probably established a way to do so. And as the trainees were mostly working remotely in different locations and they in different teams, so they might not have that much to talk about, and because they didn't share a working location, they wouldn't need to discuss with people, especially on things like where to go for lunch, since everybody was working from home. So as a critical mass of users was not reached, there was no spontaneous discussion. And one possible issue was maybe also related to the need to register your Google account and the lack of iOS version, but the latter is unlikely to be a major factor, as all the trainees were provided with a work phone and they were for the most part Android phones. So we will do a pilot study with at least 20 users for 1 month within the project consortium to get an idea whether the technology that was developed will work, and we will hopefully get some information on the context recognition and how it works, and also whether it affects information overload. And that was it for me. Thank you. And here's my email address if you want to send me questions or comments after this session.
Thank you, Katri. Thank you. This was really interesting. You hear me?
Yes.
Yes, because I'm so impressed because you even share with us what doesn't work. Most of the speakers always try to say everything is perfect. So in short, it is not easy to find also users using testing platforms. Do you agree? It's not easy, no?
Yeah, it's not easy always. And actually, this is one of my pet topics is the motivation of users. So how to get people to motivate or how to get people to participate in these different pilots and studies and experiments. So this is something that I've explored in relation to many topics. And also this is why I had so many theories on what possibly went wrong with the pilot that we were trying to do in the summer. And it's always a case of like, this is something that I find very interesting to find out what makes people tick and what makes them participate in things. So this is, we're still looking into it, and we try, of course, this is an amazing learning opportunity also to be able to figure out what works and what doesn't.
Yes, and I would like to give Ville Ollikainen from VTT, who's a colleague of Katri. He asked me to give the microphone. I'm going to try to do this as he's one of the participants, as there is, of course, a next Helios challenge, and people could participate here, and I will try to give you the microphone. It sometimes has a little bit difficulty. I'm trying it. Wille, and does it work? We have to see. If it doesn't work, we have to.
Yes. Thank you, Carmen. It seems to work. Hopefully my camera is working as well.
Yeah,
okay.
Even the camera works. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm working in the same project with Katri. My name is Ville Ollikainen, and I'm from the VTT Technical Research Center of Finland. Do you see my screen?
Yes. Perfect.
Okay. So Katri was showing a couple of screenshots from Android phones in her presentation. Now regarding the whole project, the whole Helios, this is one part of it, and it's called information overload control. But what the whole Helios is about, we have been preparing a technical platform or technical toolkit, if you wish, upon which any Android developer can build their own social media applications. So we have prepared here Helios Core, how the different devices are communicating with each other, which groups are formed, and which contexts are formed. So this contextuality is very essence of the whole Helios. When I am at work context, the messaging should be aligned so that I am not interrupted by other messages which are nothing to do with my work, unless the person is very important. Or if I am in sailing club context, let's say, then it is the messages from the sailing club that count, and not necessarily anything else. So this part of the intelligence which Katri just showed was one of the system modules, as we call them, which are put on top of this Helios core. And on top of everything, we have these apps built, which are then utilizing the whole thing there below. So if you are capable of doing Android programming, or you know people that can do it, and you got interested in this particular topic, the app Katri was presenting with all source codes, with all build instructions, will be available later this week in GitLab. And to access these codes easily, now it's the opportunity. Join Helios Challenge. Go Google Helios Challenge and Google will bring you right to this particular page. Make the registration, and for the next 3 weeks, this is the opportunity. For the next 3 weeks, our developers, our experts are available for you to answer any question you have, to help you build your own application on top of this Helios toolkit, on top of these Helios components, using this contextual thing, using this information overload control. Just pick those modules and features what you feel that would be important for you, and make an app. And who makes the most interesting app will win the prize in the challenge. More details you will find from this Helios Challenge webpage.
Thank you, Wille. This was very great. So we are informed now that we can actually participate and become users of this platform. And also Katri is back. This GoToWebinar tool I'm using here is sometimes tricky, but it worked, yes. So we're all now in the picture still. Now, a question comes now to Katri. Katri, you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Perfect, perfect. It works. And I personally would like to know if there is actually a user group which is like easier to get than another, like for consumer studies. Is it easier to get young people, students, or what can you give as a recommendation? Which user group would you easiest involve in your testing evaluations?
I think it depends quite a bit on the context. Also, if it's online, then senior citizens are often very difficult because they might not have the skills to participate, especially if it needs more than just participating via Teams or a tool like that. So sometimes we have had workshops where you need to be able to use more like collaborative tools within the workshop or panel discussion. So it's difficult to find people with the skills and also the tools to do that. But oftentimes I think that people are, when we recruit actual consumers, we do need to provide something in return. So it's like with the services that I was describing, that you get something, so you give something. So oftentimes they are receiving an actual reward for participation. What I find more difficult is actually involving people who are participating in their work role. So if I'm asked to participate in a study that would, let's say, discuss something about the use of office space around me, even though I mightn't benefit from it directly, it's not part of my core tasks at work, and it's also not something that I would do on my free time. And also it might be a difficult situation because we don't necessarily have the means to reward people for participating in this, so they would need to be motivated internally, have the intrinsic motivation to participate in that kind of study. So I think for consumers where you can actually throw money or gift cards or something like that at them, it's easier to get them to participate because they are still selling their free time and they get to decide. I think there are a lot of parallels to what I was saying before. So they are in control of their free time and they get to decide how to use it, and they can trade it for these rewards that they get. But for your work time, you have other concerns during the workday.
Yes. And the next, I mean, we're going now, Helios is coming to an end, we know, probably soon, as this was a 3-year project. What do you want to solve beyond? I mean, what interests you beyond Helios? Which research questions? Are you in another project in the moment? What interests you?
Well, we have lots of projects going on. So currently I'm also I'm the project manager or the VTT project manager for a project that deals with user-centric public services. So we have several cities across Europe that are participating in this, and we are trying to develop new tools and methods that can be used to develop digital services so that the users are involved and they are user-friendly and user feedback gets noticed as well. Also, we are trying to figure out how to get people to eat more environmentally friendly food, and there are lots of we are trying to figure out what we have to do with people's what are essentially. I think that there is a motivation factor in all of them, what I do, so that you can see what motivates people to do the right thing, or what gets them to do what is expected of them in a way that they also feel that this is rewarding for me. Not necessarily in the form of an actual reward, but this is easier for me. This is nicer for me to do this like this.
And this comes to the user-centric design cycle. Are you in projects, do you like to also include user groups just in the design process? Means like when you're designing the application, just before they can even test anything, the design process, no? Are you doing this?
Well, essentially, I think ideally, at least, it should be so that it would be an iterative process that you would actually include people. It's not always that I get to be involved in the whole process. So oftentimes we are not actually developing an actual end product. This was actually the Helios project was different in that way that it was developed from start to finish, and we get to see the end results. But often we just provide some kind of information, some kind of insight from one point in on the development process to somebody else, and then they might do something with that information or not. But we are also providing the methods and tools and making people learn how to get the most out of users and get their voices heard as well.
Yes. So, and are you a big team, or are you, are there, it's like a big department doing this, or are you alone?
This future consumer research, we are about 20 currently at VTT, and we have a subset of our team are especially focused on food related research topics. So this is a very big area for VTT, developing new kinds of meat substitutes and also like developing environmentally friendly ways of producing food. So this, and also the acceptance of these is very important, and I have myself also worked on these topics as well. And then for the other part, we are doing almost anything and everything under the sun that has something to do with users, be it consumer users or professional users. So we are also dealing with people who are using things as part of their job and not necessarily as a consumer.
Yes, and here comes a question. User-centric public services can public library books better? This is different, it's difficult English. Let me try again. It concerns user-centric public services. And the question is, can public library books better accessibility be in the area of your interest?
Better access to library books, or
could this be an interest of you, which concerns better accessibility of library books? And is this something which interests you?
Yeah, but everything that has to do with better, like providing better things and better access to users is an interest to me. So currently in our User-Centric Cities project, we are mostly focused on the digitalization of all kinds of public services. But of course, like let's say library services are part of that. And especially during the pandemic and lockdowns, it was very important to be able to provide people services that they would have been without, that they need or require. And also libraries were shut down at some point, at least in many countries. So also, whether it is through digitalization or other means, then of course providing better access to everything like this is very important.
And we're coming now slowly to the end, and my favorite question is, which I nearly ask every speaker, is how you think we can get more students, startups, SMEs, anybody out there in Europe involved in studying, developing, using, testing, piloting, applying trustworthy information technologies. How it's a political question more. If you have any idea how to get more young people, more talents, more creative people, what would you do to make it better?
I wish I knew. I wish I knew how to get people to be active and participate in everything. But I think that we have worked closely with a upper secondary school that is right next to our offices, and building this kind of trusted relationship with them, and also with the university. We are in very close collaboration with Aalto University as well. So creating this trust between them and this collaboration, I think it has enabled us also to be able to reach these young people, and hopefully they also feel that they can trust us and also be involved in these kinds of and research projects. So we have done hackathons with these students several times, and I think this Helios challenge is also a step. I hope we get many submissions and participants, because I think this is, if you get the word out, I think that there are people there who are very interested in this kind of thing.
Yes, it's very important. I think the trust. I must say it's it's also in what you're doing, and I can only share also from experiences that if you find the trust of a group of people, then they're willing to go. And how to do it? Sometimes really just speaking with them, no? Just going there, just get the teacher or the professor or the parents or the students to get them involved. I think the trust is the key of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that's why I think this is still human, no? Yes, I thank you very much. We are coming to the end for today, and it was a pleasure to have you in the cafe. It was great. And as always, I sent you the recording. You decide if we shall publish or not. You tell me in the next days when I have sent you the recording. And if Katri says yes, if you say yes, it might be available then on the AI for EU video channel. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Great to have you.